The violinist dragged the last note like a question mark. Crystal caught the light. Laughter floated, then thinned. I was halfway through a toast when my father took the microphone. He didn't ask, he claimed it the way he claims air. Patrick Richmond loves stages with expensive ceilings. He tapped the mic twice, smiled at the chandeliers, and told the room to make a little silence for family. 200 guests obeyed. He talked about legacy, about daughters, about a house built on love and discipline. My mother stood just behind him, chin lifted, smile lacquered. Emily glowed beside her new husband like a bridal advertisement, perfect teeth, soft tears, camera-ready innocence. Then my father said my name. He said Amanda had decided to do something beautiful for her sister. He said generosity ran in our blood. He pivoted, palm open, and delivered the headline with a flourish that could sell a lie to daylight. I would be gifting my penthouse to Emily. Effective immediately. For love. The room froze mid-breath. Even the ice in glasses stopped moving. I felt every eye land on my face like hands. 200 witnesses waiting to see if I would curtsy or burn. My mother's smile didn't move. Emily pressed her fingers to her mouth, surprised, but not surprised. Cameras rose in a glittering forest. I didn't stand. I didn't nod. I measured my pulse against the stem of my glass and counted 3 beats, slow, steady, mine. I have learned to breathe through storms with lipstick on. I have learned that silence, placed right, can be a blade. Patrick spread his arms. He said this was the true meaning of family, sharing. He thanked me on behalf of Emily, of the Richmonds, of tradition. He gestured toward me, inviting applause. Applause came, confused at first, then obedient. The bandleader looked at me for a cue. I gave him nothing. Inside, a small door clicked open. I remembered a hallway from this morning. A whisper in a gray suit. Be careful what they announce today. I had smiled like I didn't understand. I understood now. My father beckoned me to the stage. He wanted a scene he could narrate. He wanted my face to tell everyone that love was easy, and property meant nothing if the cameras were kind. I set my glass down. It sounded louder than it should have. He called my name again, warmer, then harder. Amanda, darling, don't be shy. Share your joy. There was that edge he keeps on a leash. Only I hear it. Only I know what it takes to make it bite. I stood. I did not move. And then a chair scraped. A man rose from a table near the center aisle. He didn't rush. He adjusted his cuff, then his tie, silver flecks catching light like small, deliberate stars. He looked at my father the way bankers look at numbers that don't add up. His voice carried without effort. Calm. Precise. Touch her assets again, he said, and you'll lose yours. The room inhaled as one organism. Phones climbed higher. My mother blinked for the first time. My father laughed like it was cute. He forgot to ask who the man was. He forgot that threats sound different when spoken softly. He forgot that silence can switch sides. The man didn't blink. He added his name, his title, the kind of credentials that pull gravity. He didn't look at me yet. He kept his eyes on Patrick, and in that line between them I felt the floor tilt. Someone whispered, "Is this part of the program?" Not tonight. My father gripped the microphone tighter. The band stopped pretending to tune. Even the candle flames seemed to hold still, like they wanted a better view. I felt my shoulders drop 1 inch. Not surrender, alignment. I let the room see nothing on my face. The trick is letting them project what they want, until you make them see what is. Would you have stood up, or let them take your life by applause? The man's gaze shifted to me for the first time, steady, not saving, not pitying, simply measuring the moment the way you measure a fuse. Ms. Richmond, he said, your answer can wait. Mine can't. Silence pressed against the glass walls. Somewhere, a single fork tapped porcelain and died. My father's smile stalled at the edges, and the music dared not breathe. I lifted my chin. The city glittered behind the ballroom like a promise I had signed myself. The microphone crackled in my father's hand. And then the man began to explain exactly why Patrick Richmond had just made the most expensive announcement of his life. I'm telling this from the calm that came later. Back then, I lived in velvet noise. In our house, image wasn't decoration. It was law. My mother, Martina, enforced it like a gentle dictator, soft voice, iron wrists. Napkins folded with military precision. Candles trimmed to equal heights. Smiles rehearsed until they were smooth as glass. She called it elegance. I learned it was control wrapped in silk. My father, Patrick, chased admiration the way other men chase air. He liked cameras angled slightly upward, chandeliers in frame, and a narrative where he was the architect of everything beautiful. He told people he built a family brand. He didn't say he outsourced the labor to his daughters. Emily was the masterpiece, 25, luminous, easy to love in photographs. She cried cute, laughed cute, apologized cute. People said she was the heart of the family. I believed them until I realized hearts don't need spotlights to work. Me? I was useful. I grew numbers like other people grow roses. Vice President of Stanley Industries by 36. Earnings calls, risk models, market storms, I handled them with a calm Martina mistook for coldness. She described my career as finance work, the way you describe a distant cousin at holidays. Polite, blurry, unthreatening. Years before the wedding, the ledger had a hidden line, Amanda covers shortfall. My father's temporary cash crunches landed in my inbox with subject lines that sounded like love. My mother's emergency spa invoices came with teary voice notes about stress. Emily's bridal costs expanded like fog, venue upgrades, floral walls, a string quartet that required a separate sound engineer. I wired funds, smiled, and told myself dignity could be quiet. There was a summer when my parents almost lost the lake house. I negotiated, refinanced, and wrote the final check. They called me their guardian angel over oysters and champagne. By dessert, my guardian wings were back in the closet, and the conversation returned to Emily's skincare routine. I kept receipts no one wanted to see, contracts, transfers, notarized deeds. Not because I planned a war, but because truth gets lonely without paper. If you grow up inside a theater, you start thinking applause means safety. You start believing that if the audience claps, you must be okay. I swallowed that lie for years, dressed it in couture, and wore it to work. My grandmother once slipped me a note after a family dinner. 3 words in a shaky hand, keep your light. She knew what performance can steal. When my father suggested I sit in the front row for the ceremony and keep things simple, I recognized the assignment. Be beautiful, be generous, reduce yourself to a pleasant outline. I agreed with a nod that meant nothing. My nods often meant nothing. That was my specialty, appearing cooperative while conducting my own weather inside. I financed a portion of the wedding because I could. I justified it as diplomacy. Yet every transfer felt like a small theft from a future I hadn't allowed myself to imagine. What would I have done with that money if no one needed saving? The answer arrived slowly, like a tide changing beneath a polished pier. At night, I stood in my penthouse and watched the city breathe. I heard my own breath match it. I realized silence isn't peace when it costs you your name. The week before the wedding, Emily thanked me at the rehearsal for helping with the expenses. Cameras caught my smile, microphones missed my pulse. Helping. That word shrank a mountain to a sugar cube. My mother nodded, pleased. My father shook hands with investors, spinning our family like a fund with guaranteed returns. I went home and opened the folder again, titles, clauses, protective terms buried like anchors in plain sight. I traced my signature and felt something click. Not rage. Alignment. The kind that makes your shoulders drop and your spine settle into place. Would you keep paying for harmony if the harmony was built on your silence? I decided to let them have their stage. I would keep mine. I just didn't know yet that someone else was already reading my script, someone who planned to say the quiet part out loud. A week before the wedding, my father called it a quick alignment. He meant orders. He told me to sit front row, aisle side, where the cameras could love me. He said to keep things simple. No speeches. No surprises. Smile like gratitude lives in my bones. I said sure. My voice sounded pleasant, like glass water. The rehearsal dinner was curated perfection. Candles matched the linen tone. Peonies looked airbrushed. Even the waiters moved like synchronized swimmers. The room smelled like citrus and expensive certainty. Small talk crackled. Laughter arrived on cue. My parents worked the crowd with veteran grace. Investors were greeted like godparents. Relatives waited like extras. My mother glided, listing charitable boards as if they were vitamins. My father touched elbows and told stories that ended with applause. He made legacy sound like a brand you could subscribe to. Emily floated between tables, luminous by design. People told her she was the dream. She agreed with her smile. When she reached me, a photographer followed like a shadow with a job. Emily took my hand and thanked me, loudly, for helping with the expenses. Helping. That word again. It trimmed me down to a polite footnote. The camera flashed. I smiled like a team player who never keeps score. Inside, the old ache stirred. Not rage. That would have been simple. This was the ache of being translated into something useful and small. The ache of being spent like a limitless card with a cheerful ping. My mother drifted close and adjusted my shoulder strap, an intimate correction delivered in public. She whispered that elegance means not making moments about yourself. She smelled like white flowers and control. I nodded. I have a whole vocabulary in nods. The one I used said, "I hear you." It didn't say, "Not this time." From the corner, I watched my father coach a toast. He angled a guest toward the chandeliers for perfect light. He joked about Richmond women and generosity. He looked at me over the rim of his glass as if I were a prop that performed on command. Dinner moved like choreography. Appetizers disappeared and were replaced by compliments. Someone from my father's circle asked me how the finance thing was going. I said steady. He looked relieved. Steady women are useful women. I excused myself and stood by a window. The city below looked honest. Cars didn't pretend to be anything. They just moved. Would you correct the record, or let the story use your name for parts? When I returned, the band played a soft standard. Emily gave a tiny speech about love, timing, and sisterhood. She thanked my parents for making dreams feel normal. She thanked me again for helping. The room cooed. A woman dabbed her eyes like she'd witnessed sainthood. I clapped with everyone else. It sounded like rain on a roof I paid for. Then something small and precise shifted. A glance passed between my parents and Emily, quick, practiced, hard to catch unless you know the choreography. It said, "We're aligned." It said, "Wait." I saw my father test the microphone. I saw my mother signal attack. I saw Emily check the stage as if measuring where a reveal would play best. None of it lasted more than a breath. All of it lived under the perfect script. My plate cooled. My spine warmed. I touched the inside of my wrist and felt the pulse of a decision I hadn't named yet. Keep things simple. The phrase returned like a memo with teeth. Simple meant obedient. Simple meant quiet wealth donating itself on schedule. Simple meant I would sign away a home while the room applauded my heart. I smiled at the photographer again. Flash. A permanent record of a woman rehearsing stillness. I told myself I could survive one more performance. One more night of choreography. One more round of being useful and small. After that, I would choose a different script. I left early. Blamed emails. No one argued. Useful women are forgiven for working. Back home, I set my phone face down and opened the drawer with the folder. Paper doesn't lie. Ink is not polite. I traced my name on the title pages and felt the ground under me return. The city windows threw light across the room like quiet applause. I stood in it until my breathing matched the glow. I didn't know it then, but the show they were staging had a twist. And I wasn't the only one who knew the lines. Wedding morning tasted like sugar and nerves. Lilies pressed their perfume into the air until it felt like a costume. I woke before the sun and stood at the window of my suite. The city was a clean line drawing, waiting for someone to ink it. I boiled water, watched steam lift, and told myself today I would not be borrowed. Today I would be mine. Downstairs, the hotel had turned itself into a magazine spread. White draped everything. Staff moved in a hush that pretended to be respect but was really choreography. A planner clipped orders into the air like a bird cutting wind. My mother inspected chairs for invisible dust. My father rehearsed gratitude with anyone who looked rich. I smiled, nodded, moved. Inside, the water held a simmer. When the elevator opened to the ballroom corridor, I saw him, the man from yesterday's glance I couldn't place. Gray suit, silver-flecked tie, the calm of someone who does math in his head while other people brag. He was talking to a tech about audio latency like it mattered more than flowers. It probably did. He noticed me noticing him. No rush. No smile. Just a small acknowledgement, the kind people in real power allow themselves. As I passed, he spoke low, measured, like he was handing me instructions for a parachute. Be careful what they announce today. Not dramatic. Not a threat. A weather report. Then he looked past me, as if the day had more lines to read. I kept walking. The hall swallowed the words, but they landed anyway. Be careful. I filed them next to 100 other warnings I had ignored because family is supposed to be safe. In the bridal prep room, steam from curling irons mixed with hairspray and ritual. Emily sat in a silk robe, soft and bright, practicing surprise in the mirror the way singers check pitch. When she saw me, she lit up on cue. She asked if I slept. I said enough. A photographer perched, hunting sisterly moments. I gave him one, forehead to forehead, a whisper that sounded like love, "You look beautiful." My phone buzzed. Unknown number. They'll take what's yours tonight. Don't lose it. No signature. No emoji. Efficient fear. I read it twice. Then I read Emily's eyes. Then I read my mother's hands rearranging orchids that didn't need rearranging. I felt a door inside me ease off its hinge. Would you ignore a warning if it confirmed what you already knew? I slipped out under the excuse of finding a quiet corner. The corridor was empty except for two voices bleeding through a partially closed door. My parents' voices always did this, poured honey on strategy. The announcement plays after the second toast, my father said. Spotlight front left. Mic handoff on applause. Tone warm, my mother added. Keep sharing and sisterhood high. Don't say transfer, sounds legal. Emily's voice floated in, thinner but eager. And if she hesitates? She won't, my mother answered. Cameras make cowards generous. I stood still, back against cool wallpaper, heartbeat mapping the pattern. I knew better than to move. Predators aren't just teeth. Sometimes they're scripts. My father continued, lower now, the way he speaks when he wants gravity. If she throws a scene, I'll frame it as exhaustion. We've invested enough in this narrative. Guests will defend love over paperwork. Paperwork. I let the word pass through me like a cut. They had rehearsed my compliance. They had baked it into lighting cues. They had timed my surrender down to applause. My mother sighed, a satisfied sound, like a drawer sliding closed. No one says no under chandeliers. Something in me stood up, taller than my body, older than this hotel. It wasn't rage. It was clarity wearing calm's face. The kind of clarity that organizes you from the spine out. Their voices moved, chairs scraped, a door clicked. I waited 5 breaths more, then slipped away. The hall smelled like lilies and wet money. Back in my suite, I looked like a woman getting ready. Inside, I was a ledger balancing itself. I set my phone on the desk and watched it like it might confess more. The man in the gray tie. The text. The overheard stage directions for my life. The pattern was no longer subtle. It was neon. I opened the closet and touched the navy gown. Structure, not softness. It would hold its shape even if I was shaking. My fingers found the diamond earrings I bought after closing a miserable, beautiful deal. They were not heirlooms. They were proof. I laid everything out in lines the way I prep for earnings calls, calm, precise, inevitable. Then I reached for the folder. Paper made its small noise, the one I love, authority without volume. Title. Ownership. Compensation package clauses. The anti-coercion language we had insisted on after I'd watched another executive's life be farmed out by people who loved him. Ink traveling like a guardrail along the edge of a cliff. I scanned, confirmed, breathed. The text's cursor blinked like a metronome. Ballroom A, 8 p.m. I typed a single instruction to my attorney and attached the documents. My thumb hovered 1 second, respect for the moment, then pressed send. The sound was small, a digital click. It echoed bigger than any toast. Outside, someone laughed too loudly. Somewhere, a violin tuned a long note that felt like a warning. I sat at the vanity and drew a clean line of eyeliner. My hand didn't shake. I pinned my hair in place like securing a plan. When I stood, the mirror offered back a version of me my family had never earned, calm at the surface, sharp underneath. If performance is a cage, then preparation is the key. I slid the folder into a slim case and rested my hand on it. The gown's zipper rose like a vertical promise. The earrings caught light and threw it back. On my way out, I paused at the door. The city blinked at me from the window, indifferent and honest. I matched its honesty. I didn't know who sent the text. I didn't know the man's full name. But I knew 2 things: they had staged a theft, and I had just rehearsed the refusal. The elevator chimed. The doors opened like curtains. I stepped in, and the show finally had a second script. Preparation looks boring from the outside. Inside, it's a drumbeat. I closed the door to my suite and laid everything out like evidence. Contracts on the left. Ownership title centered. Executive compensation schedule on the right. The anti-coercion clause sat under a yellow tab. No transfer of assets tied to compensation may be compelled by family, board, or public pressure, direct or implied. It read like a seatbelt. Tonight, I intended to wear it. I scanned the pages a 3rd time. Not because I doubted the words, because I wanted my breath to match their certainty. I opened a new email to my attorney with the subject, execute per clause 9, C, if triggered. Attachments loaded, one by one, like quiet soldiers taking positions. I typed a line, be ready at 8 p.m, Ballroom A. Then I hit send. The soft whoosh sounded like a line crossing a finish. His reply landed in less than a minute, received. On-site counsel on standby. DocuSign plus timestamp protocol armed. If they push, we pull. I didn't smile, but my shoulders eased a fraction. Paper might be silent, but tonight it would speak. I texted building security at my penthouse. Confirmed guest list, no changes without my code. It wasn't paranoia. It was housekeeping. On the desk, the navy gown waited. Structure, not softness. I stepped into it and felt it hold me where I needed holding. The zipper slid up like a line being drawn. I fastened the diamond earrings I'd bought after a brutal deal that turned in my favor at the last minute. They were my reminder, I am allowed to be the good news in my own life. At the vanity, I kept the makeup clean, liner precise, lipstick that stayed put. I left my hair in a low, deliberate sweep. The look said, unshakable. My mother would call it severe. I called it mine. I opened the slim case and slipped the folder inside. The latch clicked. Proof has a sound. Would you armor your heart with paper if paper was the only language they respected? A knock at the door, hotel staff with a white envelope from the event planner. Timeline, placement, and a little card that read Sister of the Bride, front row, aisle. My name wasn't on it. My function was. I slid the card into the trash. When the door closed, I took it back out. Evidence. Patterns like this don't look like cruelty. They look like organization. I checked the time. 7:28, the phone lit up with texts that pretended to be hugs. My mother, proud of you today. Elegance is sacrifice. My father, remember, keep it simple. Emily sent a heart, a ring, and a sparkle. I stared at the screen until the icons turned into shapes with no meaning. I typed nothing. Silence can be a boundary when words have become a leash. One more step. I opened the safe, took out the notarized copy of my title, and photographed it on the desk with the evening's program in frame. Timestamp captured both. Then I placed the copy back in the safe and left the original in my case. Belt. Suspenders. Steel. The elevator ride down felt like descending into a theater I didn't audition for. My reflection in the mirrored wall looked steady. Not cold, measured. I let my fingers rest on the case. Calm is contagious when you decide it is. The lobby buzzed with guests and flowers pretending to be forests. A junior planner tried to steer me to the aisle seat card again. I thanked her and kept walking. People who have always managed you don't know what to do when you don't bend. In the corridor to the ballroom, the air cooled. Sound deepened. The man in the gray tie stood near a lighting rig, speaking with someone who had the posture of a person who solves expensive problems. He noticed the case in my hand and gave the smallest nod, respect, not rescue. I didn't ask his name. Names would arrive later, stamped and undeniable. He said only this: if they announce, you don't have to answer. His tone made space around the words, like a bench offered to someone who's been standing too long. I held his eyes for a heartbeat. Noted. One word. Enough. Inside the ballroom, the dress code was money. Crystal lines, white florals, a gloss of perfection polished within an inch of breaking. Conversations but like bees and imported flowers. The band rehearsed something soft enough to disappear beneath applause. I took a position at the back, where I could see the stage and the exits. I don't sit in cages I didn't build. From here, the choreography looked even clearer, my father at the mic check, my mother conferring with a coordinator over napkin folds, Emily practicing surprise with her maid of honor like it was a duet. I tapped my phone, 2 messages. My attorney, we're set. Building security, all verified. Your home stays yours. I locked the screen. Would you still call it love if love keeps sending invoices? The lights dimmed a shade, the room leaned forward. A planner lifted a finger. The band slid into a warm opener. Guests drifted toward their places like magnet filings finding a pattern. Someone announced that speeches would begin after the second toast. Of course they would. That's where the room is softest. I tasted metal in the back of my throat, a quiet body alarm. I breathed it down. My grandmother's 3 words arrived like a hand on my shoulder: keep your light. I imagined her small, stubborn smile and let it anchor me to the floor. I watched the first toast float. Safe compliments. Harmless laughter. A joke about Emily's childhood ballet that made strangers feel intimate. Applause warmed the air. My mother's shoulders dropped in satisfaction. My father's smile sharpened. 7:49. 7:54. 7:59. The second toast began. The speaker thanked the families, the vendors, everyone who made tonight a dream. The chandeliers wore their halos. Phones rose. The applause at the end formed a soft wave that crested and held. My father stepped toward the microphone with the practiced gait of a man who thinks he owns the floor. He adjusted his cuff, then the mic, eyes skimming the room like a collector appraising pieces in his gallery. The planner lifted another finger. Sound dipped. Light found him. I slid my case an inch closer to my leg and set my hand on it. Paper. Proof. Plan. 8 o'clock. Patrick Richmond smiled into the light and opened his mouth to sell the most expensive lie of his life. And this time, the room would get a return it didn't expect. Ballrooms lie nicely. The air is soft. The light forgives. People relax into a story they paid to believe. By the time I slipped inside, the room was full and humming. Lace, tuxedos, champagne that tasted like cold metal. I stayed at the edge with a clean line to the stage and a second line to the exit. The case rested against my calf like a sentry. I watched the ecosystem breathe. Investors laughed louder than relatives. Old friends took photos that made them look closer than they were. Staff moved like ghosts, resetting perfection between sips and smiles. Emily did her bridal orbit, leaving glittering wake. She squeezed my hand once and whispered that she loved me. Her eyes were glassy. The kind of glass that doesn't break until it does. My mother drifted by, checking napkins as if a crease could ruin the night. She brushed my sleeve the way people brush lint from a stranger. Front row, she murmured. A reminder disguised as etiquette. I offered a pleasant nod that meant no. My father stood near the stage, comfortably tethered to the microphone. He has the posture of someone who trusts the room to catch him. He tapped the mic and nodded at the sound tech like a conductor pleased with his orchestra. The chandeliers warmed another degree. I let my breath slow until I could hear it. Inhale to 4. Hold to 3. Exhale to 6. Calm as a lever. I pulled it. A toast floated up. Then another. The kind that tastes like sugar and biography. Laughter in the right places. Eyes watering on cue. Phones bloomed like white flowers at centerpieces. The applause had that plush quality money gives it, confident, padded, relentless. And then the tide turned. My father stepped into the light with a practiced smile. He praised the vendors, the venue, the miracle of love found in a complicated world. He said family is the engine of civilization. He said generosity proves we belong to each other. The words rolled out like wallpaper, patterned, expensive, impossible to argue with unless you have a ladder and a solvent. He used my name the way men in sales use a testimonial. Our Amanda, he said, has the biggest heart in this room. The room pivoted toward me the way flocks pivot in the sky, silent coordination, all eyes aligned. I felt the heat of it on my skin, the way a spotlight feels before it blinds. My father lifted a hand. Tonight, she's chosen to honor her sister with something extraordinary. He paused like a magician before the reveal. A breath held the ceiling up. She will be gifting Emily her penthouse. He said it clean. He said it with pride. He said it like he had just announced a cure. A soft gasp passed through the guests, then applause. First polite, then enthusiastic, then title. Cameras clicked like insects. The band threw in a gentle swell. The planner's shoulders released. I didn't move. Inside, something old and tired stood and left the room. It had paid the bill for years. It did not leave a tip. The applause kept going. My mother's smile was a sealant across her face. Emily covered her mouth, a picture-perfect tremble. She whispered to her husband, he nodded like a man receiving unexpected grace. My father extended his arm toward me, inviting the expected performance. I let the applause fall around me like confetti from a party I hadn't attended. I felt the case against my leg and the anchor in my chest. Paper has weight. So does a decision. He gestured again, a little sharper. Amanda, come say a few words. A server stalled 3 feet from me, balancing a tray and a moral dilemma. I took a glass of water and set it on a nearby table. My hands were steady. that felt like a small miracle. Would you walk into that light, or let silence carry your name for once? My father filled the gap with laughter. She's shy, folks. Then he aimed for the kill shot. And to make this even sweeter, we've arranged for the transfer to be completed tonight. A murmur. Not applause, interest. Some guests leaned forward like students with a good teacher. My mother nodded once at the tech. A spotlight tagged the aisle seat card that read Sister of the Bride as if it were a person. I looked at Emily. For a second, I searched her face for resistance. I didn't find any. What I found was relief. She'd been counting on this breath. It landed like medicine. The chandeliers gave off a quiet hum. You'd miss it if you weren't listening for the wrong thing. I listened. My father was still talking, soothing the room, folding words around the theft like wrapping paper. He used phrases that neutralized truth, just family, a generous moment, the gift of sharing. Each one was a soft weapon built to bruise without leaving a mark. I slid my phone awake with my thumb. A lock screen notification blinked from my attorney, time-stamped. Ready on signal. I didn't open it. I didn't need to. The line had already been drawn. My father's voice warmed. Amanda, darling, come up. The darling landed like a leash. I put one hand on the back of a chair and stood. The motion sent a message through the room, here we go. Cameras rose like a wave finding the shore. The band quieted. Even the staff slowed, the way people slow when a story reaches its first cliff. I didn't move forward. I held the exact spot I'd chosen and let the room feel the stall. Timing is a tool. Tonight, I had all the tools I needed. My mother's smile twitched, microscopic. My father's eyes narrowed a fraction, the only crack visible to people who know him. He tried again, warm with the edge tucked in. Amanda? I tilted my head. Gentle. Almost curious. As if considering a menu item I might decline. A chair scraped. Not mine. From the center aisle, a man stood with the deliberate grace of someone who refuses to rush for anyone. Gray suit. Silver-flecked tie. The calm of audited math. He buttoned his jacket, nodded once to no one, and drew a clean line of silence through the room just by existing. He didn't look at me. He looked at my father the way a surgeon looks at a cyst. Before Ms. Richmond says anything, he began, voice even, we should correct the record. The room tightened, the way a net tightens before it rises. My father smiled like a man who thinks he knows every exit. And you are? The man reached into his inside pocket and took out a card. He didn't offer it. He simply held it low, a courtesy to anyone who needed proof. Anthony Spencer, he said. CEO of Spencer Financial. 100 small sounds died at once. The band stopped pretending to breathe. Somewhere near the back, a fork kissed porcelain and went quiet. I exhaled once, slow. Not relief. Alignment. Anthony's eyes stayed on my father. Touch her assets again, he said, soft as a knife sliding back into its sheath, and you'll lose yours. The chandeliers hummed. The city lights pressed their faces to the windows. The applause that had crowned a theft went very still, like it finally realized what it was. I kept my hand on the chair. My other hand found the case. The latch felt cool and certain under my fingertips. Anthony shifted his weight and, without looking away from Patrick Richmond, added, "This is being documented." The room leaned forward. The story had changed without permission. And the next line would cost someone everything. Anthony didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. Authority changes the temperature of a room just by standing there. He slipped the card back into his pocket and spoke like he was reading a weather map everyone else had ignored. Ms. Richmond's penthouse, he said, is not a trinket. It is a component of her executive compensation package, specifically, a restricted property asset tied to performance and retention. I've reviewed the contract language. His eyes stayed on my father. So has counsel. A ripple moved through the guests, confusion first, then interest, then the sharp scent of scandal. People who came for cake discovered they preferred blood. Phones lifted higher, lenses suddenly brave. My father tried a chuckle, the kind that used to buy him time. "We're celebrating," he said, "and Mr. Spencer is making it sound like tax season." He reached for charm like it was a life raft. "Family generosity doesn't require paperwork." Anthony didn't blink. "Coercion does," he answered, precise as a scalpel. "And you just attempted it, on record." He turned slightly, addressing the room without ever letting go of the thread. "This event is being streamed to a verified audience of over 10,000. Multiple angles. Open source archive." He let the words settle. "No one here will need to rely on memory." A sound moved the ceiling, half gasp, half hunger. The band pretended to reorganize sheet music. The planner checked the tech booth with the panic of a pilot who just realized the runway is water. I felt that strange combo in my chest, calm and voltage. The case rested near my ankle like a promise I had already kept. My phone lit up, counsel watching. Trigger validated. I didn't look down again. I didn't need to. My face stayed neutral, the way you hold a candle out of the wind. My mother tried the old script, warmth varnished over demand. She told the room this was a misunderstanding. She called Anthony dear. She said I was shy. She said I'd planned a surprise and someone had ruined it. Her voice trembled with curated outrage. Anthony let her finish. Then he turned a fraction, respectful but immovable. "Mrs. Richmond," he said, "the contract language includes a protection against exactly this. Family, board, or public pressure, direct or implied. Your husband used a microphone. That qualifies." The word pressure finally had a body. You could see it hanging between the chandeliers. Patrick tightened his grip on the mic. "You don't know our family," he said, trying steel. "This is love." "Love doesn't need a stage to be binding," Anthony replied. "Fraud does." A low, involuntary "oh" passed through the guests like a breeze finding the crack in a window. People shifted. Investors adjusted ties that suddenly felt too tight. A woman near the front lowered her phone and raised her eyebrows, choosing live experience over replay value. "Would you feel relief or fear if someone finally named the thing you've lived with for years?" I let one breath out through my nose, small, measured. Emily's fingers were white around her bouquet. For a second, her eyes found mine, looking for a shape she recognized. The room had turned, the light wasn't flattering anymore. She looked younger. Then she looked away. Anthony continued, each sentence a clean stare. "Under Section 9, c, any attempt, public or private, to compel transfer nullifies the transfer and triggers a defensive action, legal notice to counsel, timestamped recordings, and, if necessary, asset freeze protocols on the initiating party." He let the last phrase hang a beat. Initiating party means the person at the microphone. My father laughed too loudly. "This is absurd." He pointed toward me, a director trying to save a scene. "Amanda can speak for herself. Amanda, tell our guest you wanted this." The room pivoted to me like a flock, fast and silent. I felt the familiar urge to make everyone comfortable. It passed through me and kept going. I lifted my chin a notch. "You made a decision for my name," I said, even, clear. I didn't. No flourish. No apology. Words that fit in one breath. They landed harder than volume. Something changed then, something you can't capture on a phone. A few people put their devices down and looked with their eyes. A man in the second row muttered to his wife. Someone near the back said, "She didn't agree," like a diagnosis. Anthony resumed, calm returning like tide. "For anyone concerned with compliance, we're also documenting conflicts of interest and potential misrepresentation to partners and guests." He glanced, not at me, but at the cluster of men who fund things because they like the sound of their own certainty. Any business premised on this family's stewardship should be aware of what they consider acceptable. Mr. Andretti straightened in his chair as if a string had been pulled. He took out his phone and typed with the briskness of a man canceling a reservation at a restaurant that just failed its inspection. Across the aisle, Mrs. Johns folded her program with neat disgust. Aaron Tote's expression moved from curiosity to calculation to exit. My mother tried for tears. They didn't arrive on time. Her face stalled between scripts. Emily whispered, "Dad," and I heard the child in it, not the bride. The one who expects magic fixes and curated outcomes. The one I had paid for more times than I want to admit. Patrick pressed forward. We're done with this. He looked at the crowd, summoning the old spell. A private matter. Let's enjoy the evening. Anthony didn't move. You made it public, he said, echoing the truth I'd been holding like a hot coin. He tilted his head toward the ceiling rig. And your livestream agrees. The screens along the back wall, meant for wedding slideshows, flickered to a soft split screen, the stage, the crowd, the mic. No audio, just captions generated live, gifting her penthouse /coercion /section 9, C. You could feel the planner die a little inside. Would you still clap if the captions told you what the clapping was for? I moved one step forward, enough to change the geometry without surrendering ground. I didn't look at my father. I looked at the room. You wanted a spectacle, I said, voice steady. You got one. A breathless hush. A glass somewhere slipped from a hand and shattered in a silver pulse. No music. No rescue cue. Just the soft whir of 1,000 tiny fans inside the lights, sounding like a verdict. Anthony turned his body fully now, including me in the circle of his calm. Ms. Richmond has nothing further to say, he announced, until counsel is present. My father tried to speak over him and found his timing stolen. The trick he taught me. Anthony stepped aside, not retreat, invitation. Space opened around me, and the room leaned into it, unsure whether to fill it with noise or listen. For once, they chose to listen. I set my hand on the case. The latch gave its small, certain click. And that was the moment the first partner stood to end my father's career in real time. The first to stand was Mr. Andretti. Gray hair, lake-deep voice, a handshake I've watched decide contracts. He didn't clear his throat. He didn't apologize for interrupting a wedding. He just addressed my father like a man closing a ledger. Patrick, he said, our collaboration pause is effective tonight. Counsel will follow. No theatrics. Just the soft thud of a door closing. A rustle moved the room, linen against linen, status against status. You could feel men check their mental spreadsheets. Who's exposed? Who's next? My father laughed, a note too high for the key. Luigi, don't be dramatic, he said, defaulting to charm. This is a family joke gone sideways. He tried to fold the air back into a party. Anthony didn't let the air comply. No, he answered, steady. This is exploitation dressed as affection. He didn't raise his voice. Labels don't have to shout when they finally fit. Mrs. Johns stood next. She moved like a boardroom in a single body. My office will issue a statement in the morning, she said, eyes flicking to the cameras as if to thank them for their service. We denounce this. She looked at me for one heartbeat, cool, human, and sat. A planner near the wall whispered into a headset with the urgency of someone realizing the boat is, in fact, a sieve. The slideshow monitors were still on captions, coercion. Section 9, C. You didn't need audio, the words did the cutting. Aaron Tote pushed back his chair with the clean scrape of certainty. We're out, he said. 2 words. A decade ends. He didn't look at my father. He looked at the contract on his phone and decided to protect his own name. Would you keep clapping for a man if his mask fell in your hands? Emily started crying then, real tears, not the cute ones. Mascara trembled. She reached for my mother, looking for the script. Martina tried for a plan and found only air. Panic looks bad on people who practice perfection. Her smile stuttered, then collapsed, the edges of her persona showed like unfinished seams. My father adjusted the microphone, grip whitening. He tried warmth, it slid off. "Let's not turn a celebration into a courtroom," he said. "Amanda is family. She wanted to do this privately. The legal talk is unnecessary." Anthony's reply was a scalpel. "You made it public." He stepped half an inch forward, not enough to crowd, just enough to own the center. "And since you prefer audiences, here's one more fact: any attempt to execute a transfer tonight will be blocked and mirrored to counsel. Timestamped. Immutable." A hum rose from the crowd, not applause, not outrage, something in between. The sensation of a collective realizing it has been part of the trick. Phones everywhere, angles everywhere, the internet's invisible mouth already opening. My mother reached the microphone with a socialite's courage and a strategist's denial. "We adore our daughters," she announced, voice trembling in a key designed to be forgiven. "If there was a misunderstanding, it's because emotions run high tonight." Anthony offered her the one thing she could not use: clarity. "Mrs. Richmond," he said, "do you want to explain why your husband chose to announce a transfer of Amanda's executive property, without Amanda?" He extended the microphone toward her. "Not a rescue. A mirror." Martina took it. She didn't speak. Silence dragged. The chandeliers buzzed like exposed nerves. The livestream caption engine, cruel and honest, produced a readable pause: silence. In another life, I might have filled the gap. I might have softened the edges, protected the brand called family. In this life, I held my ground and let the truth sit where it belonged, heavy, undeniable, not mine to carry. Patrick tried to wrench the scene back. "Enough," he snapped, the leash finally visible. "Phones down. This is private." Anthony didn't blink. "You turned private into performance. We're just correcting the script." The room shifted again. Close friends looked suddenly far. Relatives stared at their napkins as if they could hide under cloth. A young cousin lowered her phone, cheeks flushed with secondhand shame. Somewhere behind us, a glass fell and shattered, one bright sound marking the moment a dynasty slipped. My father attempted a smile that didn't land. "Amanda, sweetheart," he said, reaching for the oldest lever, "come up here and let's put this to bed." I met his eye and stayed where I was. Calm isn't surrender, it's control. "Your daughter has counsel," Anthony said. "You have an audience," Mr. Andretti added, almost kindly, "and consequences." Emily's husband tried a whisper I wasn't meant to hear: "Can't she just sign something later?" He was new to our family's favorite magic trick: paper that appears after applause. Emily shook her head, small and lost. The script had fallen out of her hands. My attorney's text lit again: "Record secure. Your call." I didn't move. The call had already been made when they chose a stage over a conversation. Would you forgive a thief if he called the theft a tradition? The outrage became practical. I watched investors lean toward exit strategies, watched board-adjacent faces calculate PR blast radius, watched a few decent people look truly ill. Mrs. Johnson's assistant was already drafting. Aaron Tote's comms director had that fast, flat typing rhythm that means a headline will hit before dessert. Patrick inhaled for one more attempt. I saw him reach for the father card, for the speech about sacrifice and legacy and daughters with wide, generous hearts. That speech had clothed 1,000 small robberies. Not tonight. Anthony turned to the room as if he were merely a facilitator, not the man who had just changed the gravity. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, "I think we've taken enough of your evening. Ms. Richmond won't be participating in any transfer. If you require confirmation for legal or business reasons, counsel will provide it. For the rest of you, enjoy the cake." A few people laughed, the kind of laugh that punctures a balloon. Relief slipped in where fear had been. The band fumbled a chord and then went silent, Even they understood that music would be a lie right now. My mother tried again, almost pleading. Amanda, please. Don't do this to your sister. I turned my head. My voice was soft. I didn't. Then I let the words land where they belonged. Anthony stepped back, freeing the space between me and the stage, as if drawing a chalk line around a crime scene. The livestream counters ticked upward on a side monitor, a number with too many zeros to ignore. Patrick's jaw clenched. For a heartbeat, I saw the truth of him, the one who believes he owns outcomes because he owns the room. He looked smaller under the lights he chose. The spell broke not with a shout but with a collective exhale. Partners stood. Conversations fractured. The applause never returned. I felt my hand find the latch of the case again, cool, certain, mine. One more beat. One more cut. And then I stepped forward, not toward the stage, but toward the center, ready to say the one line that would end the performance for good. I stopped one step short of the stage and faced the room. No podium. No music. Just air, cameras, and truth finally off its leash. You wanted a spectacle, I said, calm enough to cut. You got one. It traveled. You could feel the sentence move, table to table, face to face, like a light switching on in a long hallway. A few people lowered their phones without knowing why. Others lifted higher, stung by the feeling they might miss the moment a mask falls. My mother reached for me, voice rubbed raw. Amanda, please, don't. I didn't look at her hand. No. One word, grounded. Not this time. Anthony stepped into the edge of my vision and did the thing no one had ever done for me in that room. He redirected pressure back to its source. He held the microphone toward my mother, polite as a surgeon, merciless as a mirror. Mrs. Richmond, he said, would you like to explain your plan? Martina took the mic like it might bite. Her mouth opened. Silence came out. The captions on the side screens gave it a name, silence. It was almost kind. Patrick lunged for authority. Phones down. This is private. The line landed and shattered like thin glass. You made it public, I answered. Not loud, final. The room went very still. Even the chandeliers seemed to listen. A cousin near the back covered her face. Mrs. John stared straight at my mother and didn't blink. Mr. Andretti set his napkin down like a flag and pushed in his chair. Aaron Tote typed 3 words, sent them, and stopped existing here. Would you keep pretending if the performance cost you your name? Patrick pointed at me with the microphone, the way men point with weapons when they forget their hands are empty. Ungrateful, he started, after everything we. Anthony moved a half step, just enough to make space. Sir, he said, quiet, we're finished. Then he did something smaller and more devastating, he offered my mother the microphone again. She didn't take it. A glass fell somewhere behind the cake and burst into bright, expensive shards. The sound was thin and perfect, like a bell for an ending. Emily sobbed, the pretty gone from it. She whispered my name like a plea and then like a blame. I felt that old reflex rise, fix it, soften it, pay for it, and watched it pass right out of me and keep going until it was someone else's problem. It looked better leaving. Anthony angled toward me, not touching, simply aligning his body with mine so the aisle opened like a decision already made. Ms. Richmond, he said, we're done here. My father tried one last shape of love, nostalgia forged into a knife. He told a story about sisters sharing a bedroom and secrets. He tried to fold the moment into childhood and call it family. I let the story die on the carpet. Childhood had already been spent. I lifted the slim case. The latch clicked, small and sovereign. Council will be in touch, I said to no one and to everyone. My voice didn't shake. My mother reached again, fingers trembling over air. They never found me. Anthony guided the path with presence, not touch. The crowd parted in a hush full of heat and pixels. People looked at me like a headline had grown legs and walked past their table. At the threshold, I paused. I gave the room one last generous thing. I didn't look back. Mercy, sometimes, is refusing to feed a dying fire. The doors swung, heavy and gold, and the hotel corridor swallowed the noise. Out here, the air felt real. Cooler. Honest. I could hear my own breath again. Behind us, muffled, my father's voice tried to restart the party. The band fumbled a chord, the audience didn't bite. Somewhere, a planner cried quietly into a headset. Perfection is cruel when it breaks. We reached the service elevator. Anthony pressed the button and finally looked at me like a human, not a case. "Are you all right?" he asked, tone low enough to carry only to me. I let my shoulders drop. "I am now." The elevator chimed. We stepped in. The doors slid toward each other, closing on chandeliers, headlines, and the only stage I'd ever been forced to perform on. My phone buzzed once in my hand, attorney, security, a subject line that sounded like relief preparing to speak. And in that thin slice of silence before the doors met, I knew the next part wouldn't be about surviving them. It would be about choosing me. Morning came like a verdict wrapped in sunlight. My phone glowed before the coffee finished pouring. A single clip had metastasized into headlines with teeth. The wedding coercion, Penthouse under pressure, legacy on livestream. 10,000 views turned into millions while the city yawned and stretched. I watched myself on a stranger's screen, calm, still, unbending. It felt like eavesdropping on the person I had been trying to meet for years. My attorney called first. "Everything's secured," he said. Section 9C, triggered. Notices sent. Digitals archived. His voice sounded rested for the first time in months. Mine did too. Then the partners started dropping like cut marionettes. Andretti's office announced a suspension. Mrs. Johns published a clean, surgical denunciation. Aaron Tote made it simple: we withdraw. By noon, the market answered with a familiar cruelty. My father's flagship sunk 2 notches in a single hour. The PR blanket Martina threw over the fire only fed it. She used words like misunderstanding and family moment. The internet replied with captions from the ballroom: coercion. Silence. Section 9C. In a world allergic to nuance, clarity won. Emily's new husband issued a statement about space to process. The ring still sparkled on her hand, but the photographs beside it had begun to wilt. Weddings are engines built to produce a story. Ours built a mirror, then broke it. I stood by the windows of my penthouse and let the city count my breaths. Cars stitched their lines along the avenue. Sirens wrote brief red commas in the day. Every sound felt honest. The doorbell did not ring. No one arrived to tell me who I was. Would you forgive yourself for the years you spent bowing to applause? I opened a drawer and found my grandmother's note, paper softened by time, ink stubborn as bone. Don't let them take your light. She had given me those words like a key and I had worn them like jewelry. Last night, they unlocked a door. The second day brought apology drafts from my father's camp, a press release that read like a hostage note, and a private text from my mother: we misjudged the tone. Tone. As if my life were a memo in need of a rewrite. I typed 3 words back and deleted them. Then I placed the phone face down. Silence is a sentence when you stop using it as a leash. By the 3rd morning, the clip had a soundtrack someone added for cruelty and reach. Strings, slow and sad, over the word coercion. I turned the volume off and let the quiet score the truth. The comments were a flood, some kind, some cutting, many precise. Strangers said the thing I had been too tired to say aloud: love without respect is a tax. 1 week out, the Richmonds tried a redemption arc. My father wore contrition on cable news. He said he had peaked. He said culture made him do it. He referenced legacy, daughters, and the weight of expectations. He didn't reference the microphone, the plan, or the clause with teeth. Markets don't forgive sentences missing verbs. Neither did the people who fund them. Emily called at midnight. Her voice was small, honest, trembling. She said she didn't know how to separate the story from her skin. I told her I believed she could. I told her I loved her in the plain, unphotographed way. We didn't solve anything. Not every call is a fix. Sometimes it's a seed you plant in a burned field and hope for rain. 2 weeks later, I met Anthony in a quiet corner of a restaurant that didn't need to be seen. No chandeliers. No cameras. Just steam from a cup in the space created by two people who prefer clean lines to performances. He didn't offer platitudes. He offered a chair and a document. Join our board, he said. Not for spite. For scale. His tone was almost casual, an engineer describing a bridge that would hold. I read the packet. Governance built like architecture, not theater. Terms that tasted like air, not perfume. A place to put the part of my mind that never sleeps. Why me? I asked. Because you didn't blink, he answered. Then, softer, and because your work is better than the room you were asked to shrink for. No confetti. No music. Just a pen and a hand that didn't shake. I signed. He nodded once, like a man who recognizes a completed line. We didn't toast. We went back to work. Time did what time does. It cooled the edges without erasing the cut. Patrick's empire learned how to spell consequence. Martina learned that silence reads as confession when you curate your life for a living. Emily learned that vows don't cure families, they highlight them. I learned the topography of my own quiet. It has peaks and air. On a blue-edged evening, I stood again at my window, the city handwriting itself in light. The penthouse didn't feel like a trophy anymore. It felt like a room with a lock I owned. The doorbell stayed quiet. The phone hummed with a different kind of noise, board packets, agendas, projects that build instead of devour. I placed my grandmother's note beside a new one I wrote to myself, "You are not a stage." People messaged to ask how it felt to go viral for saying no. I told them the truth, it felt like saying yes to a person I had owed for years. Anthony texted, "Board welcome finalized. My attorney, all clean. Close file. My mother, eventually, dinner?" I answered with a date, a time, and a restaurant with no chandeliers. We'll talk. Boundaries love public places. I slept. Not like a heroine or a victim. Like a person who finally turned a lock from the inside and heard it catch. Weeks became a rhythm. Work that mattered. Friends who didn't need to be impressed. A sister who sometimes cried and sometimes laughed, and always tried. A father learning that mic checks don't bend reality forever. A mother realizing that elegance without honesty is just a mask that sweats. I still keep the folder in the case. Not out of fear. Out of respect for the road that got me here. Paper speaks when it must. The rest of the time, it rests. Some nights, I switch off every light and let the city do the talking. I listen to the low elector come and feel my heartbeat answer. Calm, steady, mine. I touch the note. I touch the window. I look at my reflection and don't apologize for taking up space. He lost everything that was borrowed. I kept what was mine. Sometimes silence is the loudest revenge.